Hello and welcome to this interview with Matthew Carpenter. I am Jordan Scott Hardesty, and I am a co-editor-in-chief of The Grappler. The Grappler is a community journal based at the Theater School at DePaul University. And for the Wrights of Spring New Play Festival at DePaul, we have really started to interview a bunch of BFA 3 and BFA 4 playwrights on their work around TTS, both for this festival, but also in other exports. So here's Matthew. Matthew, can you first tell us where you're calling in from?
Yeah, I'm calling in from Chicago. I'm originally from Dubuque, but I decided to stay in Chicago. I live in a studio with my roommate, so we negotiate this space a lot. But I've been here for the entirety of the pandemic, and I've been keeping in touch with my family and things back home and whatnot. So, but yeah, I'm kind of lucky because I live on the 10th floor of this building, so I get to like look out and see nature and see Chicago still. I'm not like sitting in a dark box or anything. But yeah, I'm still in Chicago. I used to go out for groceries and things and like wear the mask and everything, but now I just stay in and have everything sent to me. So, but we're going strong. I'm still sticking around.
Well, that's good. Have you been able to get a whole lot of writing done in this time?
I have gotten a lot of writing done in this time, actually. I have my play Underbelly going up on the 5th. That's a radio play. And then I've got Sundown, the reading, going for Wrights of Spring, which actually I only started maybe 2 or 3 months ago. Or I guess at the beginning of this quarter was when I really sat down and started writing this play. But because of the pandemic, I'm home all the time, and I have all this time that I can just sit and think and write and work. So I've been extremely productive and gotten really far on some of these play drafts. And I have a ton of one-act plays too that I've been writing that are, I mean, that they're not super as refined as these ones because I haven't been working on it as robustly as the play that I have for Wrights of Spring and for June 5th Underbelly. But it's still just writing every day. A lot of reading, a lot of trying to keep up with what's going on. So yeah, I've gotten a lot done, which is super nice.
That's excellent. So to talk about both of these projects, of course, I served as the dramaturg on Underbelly, so I'm familiar with it. But can you let some of our listeners in on what this project is about and sort of what it was like working for this project? And something I'll say before you go into this is that this process, we had a week where we were actually in rehearsals, and then everything just turned into pandemic. And we converted everything to online. So I'd also love to hear a little bit about what that change has been like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Underbelly is a play I've been working on for, oh gosh, so probably like 2 years now almost. Because I started it at the beginning of my junior year, and it's gone through a lot of changes. I mean, just an incredible amount of changes. It's about, at its core, I think, this question of needing and loving and being close to somebody, and it's about like how extenuating circumstances and struggles can kind of make you realize what makes relationships strong and where your values lies and things like that. It's probably, that play is one of my plays that is the most like, if you watch it, or I guess now listen to it, you'll get like the sense of there are these sort of larger themes and smaller themes that you kind of have to jump around between. But that's probably the one that's the hardest for me to really like spell out without it being on the page or on the stage or in your ears now, I guess. But yeah, we had a week of workshopping this play. It's directed by Mallory Metoxen, who is absolutely great. She's fantastic. And she said that we were going to do it kind of Red Devil style, which is this new play festival where you put a play on in a week, basically. So she said we were going to work through it for that week, get it on its feet, do the whole show front, beginning to end. And we did, which was really, really cool. And then I was going to have 2 weeks of just, we were going on a vacation or a break of some kind after that. I don't remember which one specifically, but we went on a break after that for about 2 weeks. But what was interesting is that we got to the end of that week and the pandemic broke out, and we realized that this was something we weren't going to be able to come back to in the same way that we started. So when we got to that last day of rehearsal that week, I remember we were thinking, like, what do we do? And Mallory, which was really great, said, well, we planned on running the whole show today, so we're going to run the whole show today. And we did. We just got it up on its feet and we ran the whole show. Instead of calling it a day, we decided to stay and work through the whole thing, which I appreciated so much. I still have the video from that day that I still look over and whatnot. But yeah, it was crazy just thinking about how that piece has changed so much over time because of what's happened. Like pandemic writing feels very different because you're thinking about, okay, my audience doesn't get to see the image on stage. I have to create it in words and create it through some means of having the character work through something or see something that they just have to say, and like framing scenes so we get to a sense of place. Really discovering the atmosphere of plays for an audience is a really interesting exploration that's been happening throughout this whole period.
That's all very, very exciting. I'm curious about, so you said that writing in the middle of a pandemic is different. And I'm wondering if this if this product that we're going to see as part of the Wrights of Spring Festival, is that, are we going to see anything in that product that relates to the pandemic, or is a product of your play that maybe would not have been in the play had there not been a pandemic?
Right. My writing, I'm very like social based, very economic based. The mantra that I tell people is that I want to bridge the top and bottom of the economic ladder, fold it over like a piece of paper and stab my pen through it. So like what's interesting about the pandemic is that I think, especially in the midst of it, I've had ideas of how to write about it, but I haven't been able to sit back and look at it from that sort of wide third-person perspective that you get when writing a play. So I think it's definitely affected writing, and the way that I have to think about staging and think about how the play exists in the community. But in terms of like what I want to put into a play, it hasn't changed yet. I definitely think it will soon in the future. But in terms of like Sundown, with the reading that's going up for Wrights of Spring, I think tomorrow now, or the 23rd. So that reading, because it's something that we decided to do with a Zoom reading, I didn't have to like have characters building the scene so much. You got to see somebody on stage. You got to see the way they feel. We got to have my director, Alec, read the stage directions to really explain kind of what's going on. Whereas with Underbelly, because it's this finished product, it's not something so much in process. We like finding a way to get into that world is so different. Yeah, so I don't think the pandemic hasn't made its way into my writing in terms of like talking about it yet. I think I will someday, or at least try. Maybe a one act that will end up in like my files somewhere buried in the next like 5 years or something. But in terms of it appearing in my writing in other more subtle ways, it's definitely there. You can definitely tell that this is something that's appeared during this period. But Sundown a little bit less. Underbelly definitely a lot because it's a finished product. But yeah, I think that question of process and product is definitely huge right now. Like what is a finished product during the pandemic versus something that's still being worked on?
Absolutely. And something I'm also really interested in that's sort of related to all of this is this is, of course, a radio play. There's
Mhm.
no visual cues or anything. Uh, so you basically translated the work that you've already created into something that can exist through audio only. And of course, we added a sound designer to this, Agata, who brilliantly brought in some of these things that makes it feel more like visual, but it's on the whole not visual. So I'm interested in if if you felt like that you had tools in your playwriting tool belt that were equipped for this, or was this something completely new for you?
We've definitely, I would say I had a few tools, not a whole lot, but a few tools. I remember second year working with Dean Corin. We have a whole period where we have to be like, hey, make sure that everything's in the text. You don't get any stage directions. Everything has to come out of what the characters are saying, which was probably the first thought that I had going into the pandemic of, okay, everything has to be out of the stage directions and into the scene, into what the characters are saying, into what the characters are doing. Which I think, say Agata, the way that she has made it so the beats and the atmosphere of that play has come alive is just so, it's so impressive, and it makes it feel like it has this sort of blood and bone and muscle to it that really lets the piece breathe and like speak to an audience on another level that's very like kind of subconscious, very subconscious in some regards, but like the conversation is a lot more ebb and flow rather than just, oh, here are some characters talking about a desk, so obviously there's a desk there, or some glass on the ground. Instead, you hear the crunch of the glass while they're walking across the floor, or you hear a sort of like even just a shift in a drone, so you know that there's an emotional beat. Those sort of things have really kind of saved like making plays in this period, is being able to find new ways of getting those things to exist in the artistic space.
Yeah, I am just so fascinated with how we were able to turn this project into something that it might be a little bit different than what we were expecting, but definitely has the merits of everything that we wanted it to be. So let's move on to start talking about your reading. I haven't heard almost anything. I read this small synopsis of this, but I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about what it's about and maybe the process of writing this and what we can expect.
Yeah, so this is a play that actually, while I was in Kristen Idajic's class last year, I was thinking about writing. We were pitching plays, and this is a play that I pitched in her class, and she sat me down. I was talking about at the time, like a grandmother of mine was diagnosed with dementia. Another grandmother of mine is diabetic, and they're starting to get older, and I like being a grandson and getting to this period in my life where I'm very far from home, and like hearing about what's going on, going and visiting and being there for a little while and then having to be gone for a long time. I started thinking a lot about that absence and like the experiences of going, seeing the person that I've cared about and known my entire life, leaving, coming back, and then being very different when I show up again. And it's this sort of surreal experience. So I wrote a pitch about it, and Kristen encouraged me to pursue it because it seemed very like there was a lot of emotion, there was a lot of story there. And so I did, and I didn't really start seriously working on it until this quarter, a little bit last quarter too, working with Ike Holter. But really this quarter is when I sat down and really started churning through it. But the play, it sort of takes these moments, like moments that my family has dealt with, that other families have dealt with, experiencing like the progression of dementia, but also like making choices on how to take care of somebody who's getting older, but also is very connected to independence, and connected to like being their own person. so exploring that topic, and then of course, like the play isn't autobiographical in any sense. The characters are very much created, but the events I would say are kind of more things that I've taken from real life and whatnot. So seeing these things encounter each other on stage, or I guess on the page right now, has given me this like kind of catharsis in working through it, but also like figuring out what this conflict that a lot of people struggle with means, or how it feels in extreme circumstances, and in like the small moments of if even just like a character wanting to be like loved in the smallest ways. Yeah, it's this really interesting piece that I've been excited to work on. Sandy Shinner has been working on it with me a lot, and I can't thank her enough. She's been super helpful in this process. But it's an exciting piece. I know my actors really enjoyed working on it. The characters have a lot of good moments in there that they get to play with. But it's been a good process.
That's really exciting, and some of what I'm hearing in that, of course, I haven't. The reading's tomorrow, so I haven't experienced this play, but I do see some obvious connections with this play and some writing in your past, and I'm interested in how you approach new plays and how you start writing new plays. It sounds like something that it tends to keep being interesting for you is returning to some things that are happening in your life and then grappling with them and theatricalizing them in a certain way that's separated from your biography, but the circumstances are still there. So I'm curious about how you begin a play, and maybe even what does it mean to write a play for you? What is the utility of writing a play?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I start a play, the plays that, I mean, I can pitch plays all day, but the plays that really stick with me, the ones that I actually want to work on, are the ones that usually have either a moment or an experience that is very real and personal, or somebody who I know very well has experienced and has shared it with me. So those moments are probably the ones that I grab onto the most, because there's so much. I think when you have an honest moment or a play about a real event, or a real, like a piece of a real person's personality, you have all of this room to explore and dig into, because there's so much that you already know about that event or that person, but there's so much that you don't know yet that you kind of discover as you're working through it, or at least muse on while you're working through it. And when I'm writing a play, I kind of take pieces of all the experiences I've had and all these people that I've known that really stick out, or like hit on the same themes that I've already chosen are important for that piece. And I kind of make a mosaic out of them, where I take maybe a personality of one person, but an event that happened to another person, or an economic status that I know somebody who's been living in, and then apply it to the personality of another person. It's like setting these pieces together, and then asking, okay, how can I make these characters into their own people, give them their own flesh and blood, give them their own world to work through, and then seeing the inevitabilities that come out of those circumstances once you choose them as a reality. Because I mean, a play, like, it's hard to write a play that is absolutely biographical. So I usually try not to do that, and instead try to write a play that is honest to some kind of experience, or like clashing of real moments or experiences that bring out something totally new when they meet each other. Yeah, so I would say that that's what I'm trying to do most of the time. I'm trying to remember what the second half of this question was.
The second half is what is writing a play for you? Like, why do you keep writing plays?
Yeah, I mean, playwriting, like the human experience is kind of this constant discovering of things about ourselves, about when we're in a new situation, or we're in a new moment together, like, what does that mean going forward? And plays are this sort of way we can sit down and look at, I mean, it's very much mimesis, like sit down and look at ourselves, but there's always this learning aspect to it, this sort of what is new that I'm learning about myself through watching this sort of created experience. Because a play is always made by a person. And whenever you have something made by a person, if it doesn't, like, even if all of the moments in the play itself are falsities or like created or made up, those things came from a person's point of view, and you get to see like how they're working through these thoughts. And so like playwriting is this kind of personal psychology almost, where you get to just like delve deep into this certain person's psyche, or like what they think of the broader community, or what they think of or what they think specific characters think of a broader community. That's always interesting. When you write a character and the character has an opinion that isn't your own, that's always an interesting place where playwriting really comes into its own, where it's like, okay, not only am I thinking in terms of my opinions, but I'm trying to create this real person separate from myself in a story, and give them to the community. Because when you give it to a community, then it's like, you hope that there's something that's being learned there. Like you're creating a language, or you're discovering ethics, or doing something that everybody just feels like they've either learned something, or they feel just genuinely better. Like, I mean, we talk about catharsis all the time. There's just the genuine feeling of just feeling more comfortable after seeing a show that you recognize yourself in. I mean, it really does create those bridges between people in that kind of way. So I think in terms of like what playwriting does, those are a couple of the things that I think it does. It's really hard to limit such an oddly unlimited field, because I mean, plays have their limits, but you can almost create an unlimited amount of like complications within the form, which is really, really fun to think about too.
Yeah, I totally agree. It is fun to think about, to have all of these things that a playwright could be, and all these things that a playwright could do. So we have time for one more question. So I'm going to give you a big, difficult question to ponder on, and that is, what is the role of art during COVID-19? There have been several articles about people with different takes about what we should be doing in this time. So I'm curious to hear, what have you been doing, or what do you recommend other people do in this time, and what is the role of art?
That's interesting. Yeah, so at the beginning of the pandemic, I remember I was very skeptical about art at the beginning. I thought, okay, we are in a crisis and we need to be doing, I mean, something productive in like, I mean, I remember I work as a stagehand, or work as a stagehand. And once the pandemic hit and we weren't able to go to the actual building to do our job, we had to be creative and find different things to do. Like one of my coworkers just started making masks. She had a sewing machine from the prop shop. She had extra duvetine from one of the projects we were doing, and she just started making masks. And I remember feeling like I wanted something like that to do, because I felt like I didn't have a way to contribute yet. Which wasn't necessarily true, because I was working as a student research assistant, helping somebody create another play, and then also I was helping set up for online classes next year for HDL. But in terms of my own art and what I was creating in terms of plays, I remember wondering whether or not I should start writing plays about the pandemic. But then I realized that I already had Underbelly that I needed to be writing, and I had an entire team for that like I needed to be ready to support, and ready to accept the support they had for me. And so we kept working on that. And I think through working on that, I realized that art has a sort of double function, where not only is it like give you this sense of normalcy, which is somewhat important, like feeling like, yeah, there will be a time after this and we should be ready for that. But it also like asks the question of how, when we're isolated like this, can we still do what playwriting and art is supposed to do when we're not isolated? because I think we have to decide as like a community, is art something that is almost an essential and incredibly important part of what it means to just be alive, like be a human being? Because art is this sort of taking things that are important to us and putting them up in front of us to think about and to reflect on. And like a world without that seems so just not, like there's nowhere to go, like there's no way to go forward really. There's no meaning to the things we do if we don't sit and think about why we're doing them. So I think over in the long term, I realized that art was still a necessity once I sat back for a while and thought, okay, I need to be writing. And I mean, I was journaling, logging everything was happening anyway, like in a historical context, like that just seemed important at the time too. But like figuring out, taking those feelings, taking those thoughts, taking what's happening and putting it into pieces, putting it into work, and figuring out how to make things that were already important prior to the pandemic starting and making it still applicable to this time period. I mean, it's just this sort of work that you realize can't disappear. Yeah, I mean, there's a selfish aspect to it in that like it's how I express myself, so I need to make it too anyway for myself. But then there's the selfless part where it's like, what is a community without sharing art? So I think that's probably what I have to say about that.
I love that. I'm with you there. I think that is such an important thing, community in this time. So listen, Matthew, this has been a really enlightening talk. I really enjoyed having this discussion with you. Tell us when your projects are going to be released.
Yeah. So Sundown will be released May 23rd at 11 a.m. And that will be found on the Wrights of Spring website. And then Underbelly will be coming out June 5th. That is our projected release date right now. I'm not sure what platform that will be released on, but you will be able to find it on the theater school website. The information will be there. Otherwise, we will find a way to let you know. So yeah, May 23rd, June 5th. Look out for Sundown and Underbelly.
Absolutely. Be sure to go on the Wrights of Spring website and into Playwright Central to find out more plays and performances that you could check out in this crazy time. Thank you for joining us, and thank you, Matthew, for letting us interview you.
Thank you so much.